Imagine boarding a plane on a completely normal night, looking out the window and watching the city lights grow smaller below, believing that in just a few hours you will arrive in another country. Now imagine something even more unsettling, that plane simply disappears from the map of the world. No explosion. No distress call. No immediate clues. That is exactly what happened with Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. In the early hours of March 8, 2014, a modern Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing with 239 people on board. Everything seemed absolutely normal, until, minutes after the last contact with air traffic control, the aircraft simply vanished from civilian radar. No emergency alert. No warning of danger. Just silence. But when investigators began analyzing military radar data and signals captured by satellites, they discovered something far more disturbing. The plane did not crash immediately. In fact, it continued flying for hours after disappearing. It changed course. Communication systems were turned off. And it headed toward one of the most remote regions on Earth. The question that began to emerge among investigators was as unsettling as the disappearance itself: did someone inside that aircraft know exactly what they were doing? And when the first clues began to appear years later, the mystery of MH370 only became deeper. The night MH370 disappeared. In the early morning of March 8, 2014, the flight Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 departed from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. At first, it was just another commercial flight among hundreds crossing the skies of Asia that night. On board were 239 people, including passengers and crew. Everything appeared normal. The aircraft climbed smoothly to cruising altitude while passengers were likely relaxing, watching a movie, or simply trying to sleep. But somewhere along that seemingly routine journey, something inexplicable began to happen. Shortly after takeoff, the pilot made his final contact with air traffic control. Nothing unusual. No emergency signal. No request for assistance. Just a routine farewell before entering Vietnamese airspace. But minutes after that final message, something disturbing happened: the plane simply disappeared from civilian radar. There was no detected explosion, no distress call, no classic signal of an aviation accident. For the flight controllers, it was as if a massive aircraft weighing hundreds of tons had simply vanished into the sky. In the hours that followed, what initially seemed like a delay slowly turned into something far more unsettling. Authorities realized the plane had not landed at any nearby airport. No communication had been received. No wreckage had been found. It was as if the flight had been swallowed by the night itself. And when experts began analyzing the last signals captured by military systems and satellites, they discovered something that would completely change the direction of the investigation, something no one expected. The last contact that intrigues investigators. When investigators began reconstructing the final minutes of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a seemingly simple detail started drawing significant attention. Shortly before entering Vietnamese airspace, the pilot spoke his final words to air traffic control: "Good night, Malaysian 370. To any experienced controller, that sounded like a routine sign-off. But as specialists listened to the recording repeatedly, they began noticing subtle elements in that moment. In aviation investigations, every word transmitted over the radio can carry important clues. Aviation experts analyzed the tone of voice, the timing between communications, and even the way the sentence was spoken. There was no panic. No urgency. Everything sounded almost too calm. That detail deeply intrigued investigators, because in many accidents the crew tries to warn controllers that something is wrong. In this case, the silence that followed that sentence became one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire mystery. But what puzzled investigators even more was what happened immediately after that final communication. Minutes later, systems inside the aircraft began shutting down one by one, as if someone had deliberately interfered with the communication equipment. The transponder, the device that allows an aircraft to appear on civilian radar, simply stopped transmitting. And at that moment a question began echoing among investigators: was this a technical failure, or did someone inside the cockpit know exactly what they were doing? And when military radar data began to be analyzed more closely, an even more unsettling discovery emerged. The mysterious change of course. When investigators began examining radar records from the Royal Malaysian Air Force, something unexpected appeared in the data. The aircraft that had vanished from civilian radar had not completely disappeared. It was still flying. And even more unsettling, it had dramatically changed direction. Instead of continuing toward Beijing, the aircraft made a sharp turn and began heading back toward the Malaysian peninsula. This change in course was not minor. Specialists stated that the aircraft executed a complex maneuver, something unlikely to occur by accident. To perform such a turn in a Boeing 777 typically requires manual control or deliberate programming in the navigation system. This raised a possibility that made investigators pause during early analysis: someone may have taken control of the aircraft. What made the situation even more disturbing was that the plane continued flying for hours after disappearing from civilian radar. Satellites operated by Inmarsat detected automatic signals sent by the aircraft for nearly 7 additional hours of flight. These small electronic pings proved the aircraft was still airborne, crossing a remote region of the planet. But they also revealed something even stranger: the plane appeared to be following a path leading directly toward one of the most isolated areas of the ocean. And when experts began calculating where that trajectory actually led, the investigation entered an even more mysterious territory. The largest search in aviation history. Once it became clear that the Flight Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had not landed anywhere and remained missing, governments around the world began responding. Within hours, military aircraft, search vessels, and satellites were mobilized. Countries including Malaysia, Australia, and China launched an unprecedented international operation. The goal was simple, but extremely difficult: to find any trace of an aircraft that had vanished in one of the most vast regions on Earth. Initially, investigators believed the aircraft had crashed in the South China Sea, since that was the plane's original route. Ships began scanning the region, helicopters flew over thousands of kilometers of ocean, and satellites analyzed images searching for debris. But as new data emerged, the investigation took a completely different direction. Signals captured by Inmarsat satellites suggested the aircraft had not flown north, but instead south, toward the vast and isolated Indian Ocean. That discovery changed everything. The search area now covered hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of deep ocean, a region so remote that few ships ever passed through it. Underwater equipment began mapping the ocean floor, deep-sea drones were sent to explore areas never previously studied, and specialists spent months analyzing every possible clue. Even with all that technology, the ocean seemed to keep its silence. And it was only years later, when many believed the mystery might never produce any physical evidence, that something unexpected began appearing on beaches thousands of miles away. The fragments that appeared years later. For a long time, it seemed that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had vanished without leaving any trace behind. No parts. No objects. No clear physical evidence. The ocean appeared to have completely swallowed the aircraft. But in 2015, more than a year after the disappearance, a strange object washed up on a beach on the island of Réunion Island, located in the Indian Ocean. It was a large piece of metal, weathered by the sea, but it immediately drew the attention of authorities. Aviation experts were called in to analyze the fragment. After weeks of investigation, confirmation came: the piece, known as a flapron, belonged to a Boeing 777. And considering the extremely small number of aircraft of that model that had disappeared worldwide, there was a strong possibility it belonged to MH370. For the first time since the disappearance, investigators had something physical in their hands. Something proving the aircraft had indeed ended its journey somewhere in the vast ocean. In the years that followed, other fragments began appearing along beaches on the African coast and islands in the Indian Ocean. Small aircraft components, some officially confirmed, others considered highly likely to be from the missing plane. Each fragment was analyzed with extreme care, as if it were a piece of a massive puzzle scattered across the sea. Yet even with these discoveries, one question remained unanswered: what exactly happened inside that aircraft during its final hours of flight? And that question opened the door to some of the most intriguing, and unsettling, theories in modern aviation. The theories that intrigue investigators. Even after years of searches and technical analysis, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 remains surrounded by unanswered questions. This has led investigators, aviation specialists, and independent analysts to propose different hypotheses to explain what might have happened that night. Some theories are based on technical data and flight behavior. Others seem almost like the plot of a thriller. One of the most discussed hypotheses suggests that someone inside the cockpit deliberately altered the aircraft's course. Analysis of the route detected by military radar indicates the aircraft performed extremely precise maneuvers, consistent with an experienced pilot controlling the plane. Investigators analyzed the background of the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, searching for any clue in his personal life or flight simulator data. Although certain home simulator simulations raised questions, no conclusive evidence was ever found. Another possibility considered by specialists involves a catastrophic technical event inside the cockpit, such as rapid depressurization or an electrical fire in the aircraft's systems. In such scenarios, the crew could lose consciousness quickly while the aircraft continued flying on autopilot for hours. Situations like this have occurred in other aviation accidents, although rarely under such complex circumstances. Even so, this theory does not fully explain the mysterious change of course recorded by radar. And while these theories continue to be debated today, one fact keeps this case among the greatest mysteries in aviation history. The mystery that still haunts aviation. More than a decade after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, one question continues echoing among investigators and aviation experts: how can a modern aircraft simply disappear in today's world? We live in an era of satellites, advanced radar systems, and global monitoring networks. And yet one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built vanished with 239 people on board, and much of what happened that night remains unknown. Official searches ended in 2018 after millions of square kilometers of ocean had been examined. It was considered the largest search operation in aviation history. Underwater equipment mapped deep regions of the Indian Ocean, ocean drones were deployed, and experts analyzed satellite data for years. Despite all these efforts, the exact location where the aircraft ended its journey has never been found. For many families of the victims, the absence of answers remains a quiet and painful reality. Even today, new technologies and independent initiatives attempt to solve the puzzle. Some specialists believe the aircraft may lie in a region of the ocean that has not yet been explored. Others argue that future analysis of existing data may reveal clues that were previously overlooked. Until then, MH370 remains a haunting reminder that even in a world filled with technology, some mysteries still challenge our complete understanding. And perhaps the most disturbing question of all is this: if something like this happened once, could it happen again?